Hello again, and welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony. Good to see you, Eric.
Bob, always a pleasure, and here we are once more into the breach, thanks to Manhattan Neighborhood Network and EVT Educational Productions. And since this is the back end of the year, this is our end of year look back and maybe start of year look ahead, or a combination
Yes.
look back and look ahead of what's been going on media wise. And so basically we'll just try to do a little updates on some of the stories and some media analysis on how well or how ill things have been covered. And when this goes on the air, probably there will still be discussion on what happened with the non-indictment of anyone down in Texas over the Sandra Bland death in police custody, Bob.
Right.
There will probably still be discussion on the mistrial in the case of the first police officer that was tried in the death of Freddie Gray in Baltimore.
Down in Baltimore, right.
There will be, I'm sure, related discussions on the Chicago fight to get another police video release that has been held up.
Right.
And who knows, they will probably tie it to the first video that was released, where, of course, there was this 1 year plus line by the Chicago police that this individual, Laquan McDonald, had lunged at them and tried to assault them, and so they shot in self-defense. You got a related story just breaking here in New York on the police line.
Right. I mean, it doesn't involve a death, but it does involve a case where a police officer arrested a citizen for filming him with a cell phone. And apparently the officer was making an arrest of someone else, and the citizen came with a cell phone to record it. Then the police officer went after the guy with the cell phone and arrested him, saying that he made an attempt to assault him. Another person was shooting at the same time and came up, and the video shows the person with the cell phone never approaching the officer with a fist. So this week, this is the Tuesday before, we're taping on a Wednesday, so the day before we tape. So now the police officer's been charged with official misconduct for lying on a criminal complaint. Not a death, but a case where, once again, the police narrative is the one that's initially reported and then gets blown out of the water by citizen journalism, basically.
The interesting thing is basically it's now become standard police narrative for any incident involving a citizen, that they're always having been to protect themselves from some sort of assault, some sort of weapon being aimed at them, or there being a threatening move made by the individual. And if there's any documentation that comes out, 9 times out of 10 so far, what we've seen is it's a bogus story. So there's continuing, even as we run up to Christmas, 2 days before Christmas, there's a big planned demonstration by the BlackLivesMatter folks in Minneapolis, in the Mall of America location, where they're planning to try to do a major demonstration because they're still demanding the release of another one of these police shootings videotapes from an individual who ended up losing his life by another police officer. The police are stonewalling those folks in Minneapolis, and so I don't know, Bob.
It sort of takes me back to my newspaper training. But go ahead. I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to interrupt.
Keep going.
But I remember when I first started as a reporter so many years ago. One of the things we're trained to do is not just report the police narrative in the story, but in the story, when we wrote the story, it would say the person held a gun at the store owner, the complaint said, or the police officer wrestled the suspect to the ground according to police. It would be attribute, 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 attribute. Don't just take the narrative, let them know where the narrative is coming from. That doesn't always happen today, either on social media or even in some of the big-time press, you'll just see the narrative without the attribution.
Yeah, I think they're finally beginning to learn their lesson, mainstream media, about the fact that they can't just continue to just parrot the police party line. They're now actually going back to the old days of according to the police,
Right.
and they're now actually saying, actually, we've actually found some other source that seems to contradict what police officers have been saying. And so we're getting more and more of that. The Black Lives Matter story in Minneapolis, for us, Media Watch, we've been sort of watching that. I remember there was an attack reported in the local press that some white supremacists had attacked and shot, I think, 5 of the Black Lives Matter. And there was another press report saying, oh, but that only occurred after the Black Lives Matter individuals had physically threatened
Right.
and assaulted
Right.
the white supremacists. So you have to actually get to the heart of some serious eyewitness accounts and get more than one source when you start to report these stories. The Black Lives Matter people in Minneapolis are getting a lot of high-profile press these days because of their shutdown of that gigantic mall. I think it's one of the largest malls in the country.
If not,
if not the largest.
Right, and one of the largest in the world.
Yes.
Sure.
So they've decided that that's a valid target. Now the quid pro quo, the pushback is, well, that's private property. But what Black Lives Matter people are saying, yeah, but they're opening to the general public so they can get the general public's money. And right. So they're as fair a target as any. What I'm missing, and what gets to the heart of what we should be trying to do on this show, is some analysis on who are really the Black Lives Matter people, because you and I both know that this is almost an organic, spontaneous springing up of grassroots people who just pretty much said enough is enough,
right.
And therefore they've taken to the streets and taken to disrupting political rallies and taking to do all kinds of things just to say Black Lives Matter. There's been some serious analysis about who or what they are, just in passing. But Bob, from what I can see, nobody's really gone into any in-depth analysis, because these chapters have just sprung up,
right.
like almost organically, instantaneously, just because these young people got fed up with people getting shot.
Right, and we were having this discussion just before the taping. I see two things happening. I see the organic popping up of these little groups because they embrace essentially the same thing, essentially the same idea of Black Lives Matter and protecting communities and improving police-community relations. So we have a lot of people in working together to embrace a subject, but just as happened in the social outbreaks of the 60s and 70s, we also have groups that are hijacking the movements here and there for their own use. So I see a little of both going on. I see more of the embracing than the hijacking going on, but it's something that we in the media have to keep an eye on. And you're right, I don't see the analysis. Maybe there is something coming out of, say, one of the journalism schools of maybe they're studying it now. Hopefully.
I didn't get a chance to read it, but I see where the New York Times had actually done an editorial on, I think the slug on it was, let me call it up right here real quick. It says, the truth of Black Lives Matter. So
okay.
Somebody in an editorial capacity decided to dig into the analysis of who they are, exactly what their message was. So basically, let's see at least a little bit of what they may have had to say in that editorial. Basically, headline, editorial board, and
okay.
It came out in September of 2015. So in our looking back, we can look back at an analysis. Opening graph, Republican Party and its acolytes in the news media are trying to demonize the protest movement that has sprung up in response to the all too common police killings of unarmed African Americans across the country. The intent of the campaign, evident in comments by politicians like Governor Nikki Haley of South Carolina, Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin, Senator Rand Paul of Tait, is to cast the phrase Black Lives Matter as an inflammatory or even hateful anti-white expression that has no legitimate place in a civil rights campaign. interesting that they parse that.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And now that you read the lead, I do remember reading parts of that editorial. And it's funny that Nikki Haley would come out on one side of this issue here, the governor of South Carolina, and then come on the side of pulling down the Confederate flag in South Carolina.
Yes.
So it just shows how politics blows people in two different directions.
But at least parts of the mainstream media is trying to parse the fact that you cannot just try to paint Black Lives Matter as an anti-white, hate-filled campaign group.
And that was the rhetoric we were seeing in that time frame.
Andrew Rosenthal, back again in September, had a piece called The Real Story of Race and Police Killings. And within that article, I say one thing for the Times, they at least tried to do some parsing and analyzing of this movement. I don't know how many other mainstream publications tried that, but in Rosenthal's piece, he basically was talking about the statistics that gave rise to Black Lives Matter. And some of the things he came out with is basically, ProPublica did an analysis that black males aged 15 to 19 were 21 times more likely to be killed by police than white males in that age group.
Study.
Yes,
I remember that.
That ProPublica, we talked about it in the Medium Watch back then. The point of the Black Lives Matter movement, and this is a quote, is not that the lives of African Americans matter more than those of white Americans, but that they matter equally and that historically they have been treated as though they do not. That's the best analysis that I've seen in a while. So good. I don't want to keep beating up on mainstream media, because they seem to be trying to get it right.
But the Times actually beats up on itself now and then. I'm not sure if they still have the full-time ombudsman working there.
They do.
They still do. But I've read a couple of reports by the editor, Dean Beckett, criticizing his own paper's reporting, because a number of the items have been either underreported or just flat out reported wrong because somebody didn't ask the right question. So I'll give them a B+ on that. But they have some work.
At least they were trying to do some in-depth analysis on it, which we can't always say that most mainstream media do much and do often or do well. Sometimes they do, so we have to say when they did.
We have an interesting story. Maybe we can pick it up later about how Fox basically does the opposite.
Might as well segue to it now and then go back to other analysis. Why not? It ties in. Because I remember you sent me something about a headline with something on, if you can call up the headline rather than my misquoting.
Yes, I mean it's on a website called Autostraddle. And it's actually a pretty interesting bit of analysis. This is how Fox News brainwashes its viewers, our in-depth investigation of the propaganda cycle. And it's not a short story. It's
a lengthy analysis.
Yes.
Yeah, I kind of brushed through it, but he actually had serious bullet points on the actual propaganda techniques being used.
Right.
Interesting.
I mean,
very interesting.
There's a particular quote I like here. I should quote the writer, posted by Heather Hogan on September the 2nd. And it says, study after study after study has shown that Fox News viewers are the most uninformed and misinformed people in America. One recent study even found that people who didn't watch any news programs at all had a firmer grasp on the reality of current events than those who only watched Fox News. And it goes on with actually good
data points and graphs and analyses.
This isn't an opinion piece. This is
research put out there for people to, but of course, based on what he's saying in that, or she, I think it's a she, saying is even when you give this fact, data-driven report to the people at Fox News, they've been so brainwashed by Fox that they call the data-driven report the propaganda.
Exactly.
Which is, it's like a circle or a dog chasing its tail. It's bizarre. I don't know, but that's part of the problem we're having.
I just want to pull out one little piece, and then we can leave this one alone, I guess. But it says, and of course, talking about Fox, once they've settled on the outcome they want, Fox News shapes its narrative and sets in motion its brainwashing cycle. Fox News' use of propaganda to isolate and indoctrinate its viewers is deliberate and terrifyingly effective. It thrives off of fear-based sexism, racism, homophobia, xenophobia, and dogmatic intolerance towards anyone who is not a straight white Christian. It's an impressive
analysis
and
yeah.
An indictment.
We've been saying that for how long?
Yes, we've been a bit ahead of the curve on this one, but
Yeah,
it's good to see it in an actual sort of academic study.
There are other people who academically analyze what we have been analyzing for you over the years, because as serious journalists, we actually have a pretty good handle on good journalism as opposed to propaganda. And when we see fake news, we call it fake news, and that's why we've been calling Fox faux fake news all along, all these years. So it's nice to see other people understand exactly what we understand. But that bit about fear, xenophobia, and the whole bit makes for a good segue, because basically, not just Fox, a lot of mainstream media tends to fall into a kind of lockstep about catering to fear, because this whole bit about terrorism and the coverage of terrorist activity, just even here at home, let's start with here at home.
Sure.
Because for instance, you get the incident that happened in San Bernardino a few weeks back, and basically you get this rise, this phenomenal rise in Islamophobia that just balloons outrageously. And of course, people like Donald Trump, when they say what they say, they just fan those flames. And
to amazing effect. I mean, the
it's
traction he gets.
Amazingly negative effect,
Right.
but huge traction. You're right about that. But interestingly enough, one or two mainstream places sometimes almost try to combat it. I know there was, I think early December, who's the guy that now does Meet the Press? Chuck Todd.
Right.
He had a young lady on who basically was a very, very good panel. And I'm trying to see if I can call up her.
And
her
while you do
name.
that, Chuck Todd made the mistake of trying to have an educated discussion with Donald Trump, and not to good effect a few weeks ago, a few days ago.
It's very hard to try to have an educated discussion with Donald Trump,
Yes.
because Donald Trump is a blowhard who just spouts a lot of actual outright lies and non sequiturs that don't follow. But the young lady's name is Dalia Mogahid, Mogahid, and she appeared on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd right around December 6th, whatever that Sunday was. And her analysis was so good that this Daily Cause writer, Egberto Willies, his lead was Dalia Mogahid once again appeared on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd. Mogahid is the co-author of the book Who Speaks for Islam and director of research at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. And her point was to tie the Dylan Roof shooting to other terrorist things. And her quote, when Dylan Roof walked into a black church, he wanted to start a race war. We didn't let him do that because we didn't cast him as a representative of the white race. We didn't give into his narrative.
Right.
We did the exact opposite. I think that we have to be careful not to give in to the apocalyptic narrative of ISIS that wants to start a war between Muslims and everybody else. And her point is, why are mainstream media individuals like Chuck Todd and other reporters trying to have Muslims have to come out and say, we abhor what ISIS does. We hate what they're doing. Basically, we know that they abhor what, as a Muslim, she's saying, we all abhor this stuff. For you to imply that we don't and we need to just get up on a soapbox every time to tell you we don't is actually insulting to us.
Okay,
And,
that's an interesting point.
It's a key point.
Yes.
It's a very key point. Because if you don't, we get more people killed by white extremist terrorists in this country, documented on the record. I'm not making this up, folk. You can look it up, as they say in the parlance. More white homegrown terrorists have killed people in this country, more people than Islamic terrorists. Okay, that is a fact. But when they start to talk about terrorism in the United States, the first thing is you have to crack down. No more Muslims coming in. Nobody who's not a Christian faith coming in.
Right.
This is pure fear-mongering that people like Donald Trump and his running buddies in the Republican Party, because even though they don't quite say it as badly as he does, a whole bunch of them said similar things.
And we've seen this before historically. We can go back as far as you want. We can talk about the Japanese on the West Coast. We can talk about any of the immigrant groups coming to America, be it the Irish or the Italians. We just see this coming up over and over again historically. This fear-mongering, we need to keep them out.
And the narrative is, if we let them in, they're going to be rampant with crime, and there'll be a burden on the society and all that. And they said it about black people, they say it about Mexicans, they said it about Irish, said it about Italians, and guess what, folk? All those people that they said it about all morphed into the accepted white race, and now they're saying it about other people. It's just, I hate to laugh, but it's just hysterically crazy that we keep doing the same thing over and over. But that brings us back to where we're supposed to be doing it, analysis of media coverage.
Sure.
And so let's just take a little look at the terrorist attacks in Europe. A whole bunch of people got killed in Paris, and we had nonstop coverage about what went wrong and how they're mourning. And you know, at the same time, a hell of a lot more people got killed in Nigeria and surrounding African countries by Boko Haram, and that barely cracked a ripple on news coverage. Even as we speak today, I saw a headline in Yahoo UK Online, 70 civilians killed by Cameroon soldiers tracking Boko Haram crossing into the Nigerian border. Guess what? Didn't pop up on my Yahoo feed here. I had to find it online on Yahoo UK. And so the bottom line is, if we don't cover these stories equally and equally thoroughly when they happen, where they happen, you're putting a predominance of prejudicial coverage for white Europeans having more reference, more preference than any other people on the planet, on the globe. We do that here at home, we do that globally, and that has to stop. That is why you get a movement like Black Lives Matter saying, Black Lives Matter. They matter globally. And in the news media, we need to be covering those stories equally and as judiciously, and what's the other word?
Well, I mean, this is a function of diversity or lack thereof in newsrooms, because when you go to the people who are editing the feeds for Yahoo or AP or Reuters, it's not a lot of people of color actually toggling the news feed and letting us, or reaching out into the feeds coming out of those countries. There are news reporters in Nigeria and elsewhere. We're just not
stringers that you could actually get stuff from.
The news is accessible, but I read a study that mentioned, and they made a few good, interesting points. Emotional connect is one thing. Yeah. Something happens in Paris, all of a sudden there's an emotional connect to the people of Paris, and it is a media center. So another component is just plain laziness. When something happens in a media center, it's awful easy to report, just like how something happening in New York would get quicker and bigger coverage than the exact same crime in Peoria.
Actually, you're right, because our good resource person, Pearl Duncan, and I had a conversation just yesterday where she was talking about the fact that even African Americans here in this country don't get as much of an emotional connect to the African continent, so that when those things happen, we don't rush to let's support, let's collect, let's send, let's assist, let's hope. And I thought about what she said, and I realized that's because we've had 400 years of acculturation media-wise, culturally, and nonstop, that continent is the other.
Right.
That's over there, and that's not what we are concerned about. So we have to actually unlearn that ourselves,
Right.
so that we can change the paradigm and change the coverage.
If it wasn't for my father coming home and once in a while dropping a copy of the Amsterdam News in the house, there's a lot of black news I never would have read at that point, because the Daily News wasn't going to give it to me, nor the New York Post or the Times at the time, which leads to somebody we should mention before the show goes out. But
yes, you're right. It's end of year show. We need to.
Yeah. And but in any case, I'll drop it at that.
No. And yeah, you're right. That's an unlearning that we have to do, even as we become proactive in learning. I had to become an adult Pan-Africanist, and it wasn't that hard. But if it weren't for people like Olumbe Brath and Gil Nobles, like it is, and a number of other things, and the fact that being in the military and doing a whole bunch of stuff on international relations, I began to see a different paradigm. But not everybody goes through that shift.
Right.
And so we in the media don't help them with that transitional learning process. It's never going to happen. And I'm saying that across the board, black, white, whomever,
Right.
for real.
And we have about 2 minutes left.
So yeah, that's part of the analysis. But to backtrack on what Bob was saying, since at the end of the year, we can look back at some of the people, at least one individual that we knew well who passed. C. Gerald Frazier worked for the New York Times for years and years, and I guess it's 2 weeks now?
Yes, just about.
About 2.5 weeks. He passed of complications on prostate cancer.
I believe so.
Yeah, and I can't say enough about the fact that he was in the trenches back in the day when
there were very few of us in the trenches at the time.
At the Times, at the New York Times,
right.
Okay? And so as longtime members of NYABJ, the New York Association of Black Journalists, Bob and I really want to send our condolences out to Gerald's family, and just give him a shout out and a salute for a career well done and well handled.
And just personal thanks, because he was a supporter. I've done a few things in journalism in the city, and you need folks like him just calling you young man, which always feels good, and just a great supporter.
And the interesting thing is, Gerald's one of the few print guys who actually was welcoming to me as a broadcast journalist in NYABJ, and we actually convinced him to come over here and do a few media watches for us in the course of the years.
And we have about 20 seconds.
So yeah, so kudos, Gerald, rest in peace. And folks, this has been Media Watch. I'm Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony. Catch up to us on YouTube at Media Watch EVT.
And thank you, MNN and EVT Educational Productions. And folks, we'll catch you on the new year, and we'll see you next time.